That famous Assamese song by Bhupen Hazarika, written in the early 1960s for the film Maniram Diwan, where he evokes the feelings of a young man who wants to sacrifice his life for this country, this motherland. The urge for freedom had ignited the Assamese almost immediately after the British occupied Assam in 1826. And within 4 years of its occupation, the British had hanged 2 freedom fighters, Pioli Phukon and Jiuram Dulia Barua. And as the freedom movement gradually built up across the subcontinent in the early 20th century, the people of Assam readily jumped into it. A series of visits by the Mahatma to the region refueled the fire of patriotism and helped forge the regional movement with the mainstream. Gandhiji had visited Assam in 1921, 1926, 1934 and 1946. Professor Chandan Sharma of Tespur University recalls,
his visits are meticulously documented by the eminent Gandhians of Assam, Amiyo Kumar Das and Liladhar Barua in their book Mahatma in Assam. During his visits, Gandhiji was accompanied by, among others, Krishna Das, whose 7 months with Mahatma Gandhiji, being an inside view of the Indian non-cooperation movement of 1921-22, also offers one of the finest accounts Gandhiji's first visit to Assam.
It is important to note that there was practically no Congress in Assam till the arrival of Gandhiji. The anti-colonial movement in the province was till then spearheaded by the Assam Association.
It may be recalled that in June 1921, 2 months before his first visit to Assam, the Assam Association, the erstwhile nationalist platform of the Assamese leaders, merged with the Indian National Congress in full support of Gandhiji's call for non-cooperation. This testifies to the fact that the anti-colonial emotions already gained strong roots in Assam. Gandhiji arrived in Guwahati in August 1921. The visit had an electrifying effect in Assam. He was given a rousing welcome on the banks of the Brahmaputra in Guwahati by a gathering of no less than 25,000 people.
Interestingly, when 4 leaders of the newly constituted Assam Provincial Congress Committee, Naveen Chandra Bordoloi, Tarun Ram Phukon, Chandranath Sharma and Kuladhar Chaliha, met Gandhiji in Mumbai on the 28th of July 1921 and invited him to visit Assam. He was initially reluctant, but having heard the Assam delegation, he cancelled his scheduled visit to Andhra and agreed to make a short trip to Assam. When he reached Guwahati on the 18th of August 1921, he changed his mind further and extended his stay to 13 days. Beyond Guwahati, he visited as many as 5 more districts: Tejpur, Nagaon, Jorhat, Dibrugarh and Silchar. Over to Professor Chandan Sharma of Tespur University.
Gandhiji reached Tejpur on August 21, 1921. Tejpur and the Darang district occupy a very important place in the freedom movement of Assam. Several top freedom movement leaders were from Tejpur. The firebrand Chandranath Sharma was among the 4 Congress leaders who met Gandhiji in Mumbai on 28 July 1921 and convinced him to cancel his tour of Andhra to visit Assam. In Tejpur, Gandhiji stayed at Poki, the ancestral house of Jyoti Prasad Agarwala. The young Jyoti Prasad Agarwala, who went on to become a great cultural icon of Assam, already set 1 million hearts on fire through his amazing songs about freedom.
Adds Meenakshi Bhuiya, a noted social worker of Tespur.
Another very important, significant thing Gandhiji is saying that he wanted to meet the weavers and women, and so promptly the Tespur Mahila Samiti had organized a meeting in the local Bengali theatre hall, and in the afternoon he had addressed the ladies, and he had openly admired the weaving skill and the various contributions that women make to their households and society at large. He was so impressed that he thought that, this Assamese rural economic practices can be really replicated, if can be replicated in other states also. Women take major part. So in a rural economy can change also. That was his opinion.
Something interesting had happened to Gandhi years before he made his first trip to Assam. And it was quite an embarrassment as well as a sensation. Way back in 1908, he had, in his famous book Hind Swaraj, made certain derogatory remarks about the people of Assam. On reaching Assam, he realized his mistake and publicly apologized for it. We quote,
"It was certainly on my part a grave injustice done to the great Assamese people. My stupidity about the Assamese rose when in about 1890, I read an account of the Manipur expedition written by a British officer. Being an indifferent reader of history, I retained with me the impression that the Assamese were jungly and committed to writing it in 1908. This hurt the Assamese. Can the Assamese have the feelings of affection towards that ignorant person who called them uncivilized? Is it possible to be angry with the man who is really ignorant? Yet, I got the opportunity to beg an apology. When I admitted my mistake and begged an apology, the people began to laugh. They did not want me to beg an apology. Who can call the Assamese uncivilized? Whoever calls them so will be as uncivilized as I am."
Jogendranath Bora, an eminent lawyer who comes from a freedom fighters family in Dibrugarh, shares his memories of Gandhiji's first visit to Assam.
On 26 August, he arrived at Dibrugarh via Nagaon, Tespur, Jorhat, and in each place he visited, that in his presence the foreign clothes were burned down by people gathering there. And throughout the road, wherever he went, right from Guwahati to Dibrugarh, the roadsides were full of people to have a glimpse of Mahatma. And they were so thrilled that they immediately wanted to join his movement, because they were, in the meantime, they were told that freedom will be brought by Mahatma within a year if the people will cooperate with him. So when Mahatma came to Dibrugarh, he also found that the rampant use of opium and liquor by the common people here, their living conditions are much deteriorating in comparison to the other places of India.
The 41st session of the All India Congress Committee was held in Guwahati in 1926. This song dates back to 1926, when it was composed by Assam Kesari Ambikagiri Rai Chaudhary and sung as the opening chorus in the inaugural session of the Congress by senior Congress leaders of the province in the presence of Gandhiji. While Gandhiji's nationwide campaign for Khadi had evoked overwhelming response in Assam, the 1926 Guwahati session of the Congress remains significant for particularly one reason among many. The entire Congress session venue, pandals, camps, as well as huts for the top leaders including Mahatma Gandhi, were all very wonderfully made of khadi cloth, produced specially by women of villages in central Assam. While this provoked Gandhiji to describe that the session was held in, quote, a city under khadi canvas, unquote. It was from 1926 onwards that every Congress session continues to be held under a khadi pandal. Gandhiji always ensured he interacted with cross sections of people. While in Dibrugarh in 1921, for instance, he particularly interacted with the women folk, as also traders, tea garden owners, as well as the labourers. According to eminent scholar and former president of Assam Sahitya Sabha, Dr. Nagin Saikia,
he also attended a small social gathering in the residence of Honorable Maulana Fajnur Ali, who was then president of Assam Legislative Council. And few European officers also, including the Deputy Commissioner, SP and Civil Sergeant, they were also invited to that gathering. Gandhiji discussed with them issues like horizon welfare, then eradication of untouchability, better facilities for the tea laborers, and campaign against opium consumption.
Though the great 16th century saint reformer Srimanta Shankara Deva had laid the foundations of an Assamese society that was free from caste discrimination and untouchability, such social problems continued in the modern times too. Professor Ranjit Kumar Dev Goswami, formerly of Guwahati University, a well-known Gandhi scholar, sheds more light.
Untouchability was there in certain form, in one form or another, perhaps not in the form characteristic of either South India or certain parts of North India. Shankardeva had done so much for the removal of certain vices from the society, including untouchability. Still, remnants of untouchability were there, and in Jorhat, for example, Krishna Sharma had opened his own Namghar for the Harijans. So that was an interesting event that became possible under Gandhi's impact.
Krishnanath Sharma's granddaughter and noted social activist of Jorhat, Rajalakshmi Sharma Goswami, describes in detail about that 1934 incident at her own ancestral house and its Namghar, the community prayer halls distinctive to Assam.
Gandhiji came, he inaugurated our Namghar as per the wish of our grandfather, Krishnanath Sharma. He asked all the Harijans come to inside the Namghar. Then he asked some of them to also distribute the prasad. While most people in Jorhat appreciated, but section of upper caste people disliked it. They were so unhappy that they imposed a social boycott on our family. Fortunately, some eminent right-thinking people stood on our side. Otherwise, we would have become untouchable till now. Looking back, I feel sad. But then I also feel proud of my grandfather Krishnanath Sharma and all those who stood by him.
That Jorhat incident, as well as other aspects of Gandhiji's Jorhat visit in April 1934, has been described in details in Krishna Sharma Diary, an autobiography of freedom fighter Krishnanath Sharma in Assamese. The two Tespur visits of Gandhiji in 1921 and 1934, too, were very interesting. It was at Tespur that he wrote 2 essays on Assam, in which he praised the region's natural beauty, and more particularly, the hard-working women. Noted Tespur-based social worker Meenakshi Bhuiya, in whose ancestral house Gandhiji had stayed, tells us more.
Tespur was pleasantly surprised when they heard that Gandhiji was coming for the second time and wanted to visit Tespur Mohila Committee in 1934. Quite a few ladies, they gave their jewelries to Gandhiji's Harijan Fund, and also Paramananda Agarwala gave a heavy jewelry to Gandhiji to his Harijan Fund.
In Guwahati lives an 88-year-old lady, Emi Das, who has a memorable experience to share. Then just about 11 years old, Emi Das had the rare opportunity to accompany Gandhiji almost round the clock during his 3-day stay in Guwahati in 1946.
I knew, of course, that he was a big man. His pictures were there in the books. But I had no real clue about who he really was. He would take me along to his meetings, I remember. He'd be sitting in his car talking to others. Suddenly he would say, "Emi kahan hai?" and pick me up in the car. Abba Gandhi and I would accompany him to the meetings. I remember the sea of people at his meetings. People on treetops too. One day he suddenly said, "You have to teach me Assamese. You are my teacher from now." He took out a book and showed me something written in Bengali. Balok Shokole. "How do you say this in Assamese?" he asked me. I replied, "Balok Hokole." He tried once, twice, several times, till I got exasperated and said loudly, "Not Hokole, but Hokole." He laughed so loudly that all the ashram ladies came and peeped through the windows. That childlike laughter still rings in my ears.
Emi Das also recalls that poignant moment when Gandhiji was leaving Assam for the last time in 1946.
The time for his departure drew near. He was pacing up and down, deep in conversation with the leaders. He started saying his goodbyes. Suddenly he said, "Emi kahan gayi?" I was hanging around close by, wondering if he would call me. I ran up to him. I didn't know Hindi much. I wanted to say, "Monot rakhibo." I managed to say, "Bapuji, dil mein rakhiye." He replied, "Dil mein nahi, pran mein rakhunga." Saying this, he released my hands and walked away abruptly, never looking back.
दिल में नहीं प्राण में रखूंगी बिल्कुल कोई पट के हाथ देखो नहीं पिछले ऊपर न चले.
Women who have dedicated their lives for the cause of society in the footsteps of Gandhiji and Kasturba Gandhi continue to spin yarn and weave cloth in the Kasturba Ashram in the heart of Guwahati. Kusum Bora Mokashi, president of the Kasturba Ashram, recalls,
गांधी जी के उम्र उस समय 77 हुआ, इसीलिए गांधी जी ने कहा मैं इस बार असम जाऊंगा तो मुझे ऐसे जगहों में रखना कि असम के बीच में और जिसमें सब लोग आके मुझे मिल सकता है. यहाँ के उस समय जो लोग थे स्वतंत्र सेनानी लोगों ने यहाँ गांधी जी रहने के लिए एक मकान बनाया. ये मकान डॉक्टर हरिकृष्ण जी का ये रहने का एक जगह था और गांधी जी ने ये भी कहा था कि मुझे ऐसे मकान में रखो जिस मकान में असम के गांववासी रहते हैं. के बाद में उसका नाम ही हो गया गांधीगढ़. ये बांस का और लकड़ी का बना हुआ है और ऊपर एकदम असम का जो एक उड्डू होता है खेर बोलते हैं उसको, उससे किया है. और 1944 में कस्तूरबा गांधी गुजर गए थे, तब तक के कस्तूरबा ट्रस्ट का शुरुआत हुआ था और इस जगह में 7 बहनें आ गई थी कस्तूरबा ट्रस्ट में ट्रेनिंग लेने के लिए. तो सौभाग्य की बात है कि पूरे हिंदुस्तान के बीच में गांधी जी के द्वारा वो ग्राम सेविका ट्रेनिंग को उद्घाटन कराया. देश में कहीं भी ऐसा मौका किसी को नहीं मिला, लेकिन हमको मिला.
रामे जय
86-year-old Sudakshina Sharma, a younger sister of Bhupen Hazarika, had sung a traditional Assamese prayer song in the presence of Gandhiji at a public meeting in Guwahati in 1946.
Mahatma Gandhi gently placed his hand on my head and said, "Ma, you will continue to sing for a very long time."
Gandhiji's 4 visits had had a lasting impact in Assam. Professor Ranjit Kumar Dev Goswami sums it up.
In 1921 in Polo Field, thousands of women participated in the meeting. And insofar as the impact is concerned, opium came to be eradicated owing to his influence. Then the mass participation of women in the freedom struggle became possible. So eradication of opium, mass participation of women in the freedom struggle, popularity of khadi, and overall kind of awareness. Okay, this was Gandhi's impact on the Assamese people.
And then there are poems about Mahatma Gandhi which are still popular in Assam.
I particularly remember one poem by Utul Chandra Hazarika where Gandhi was celebrated as a god in human form. Amar Bapuji Manuh nasil Nararupi Bhagavan. Gotei Biswa Samosore jar gaise bandana gan. In popular Assamese poetry, for example, in folk songs, Gandhi figures prominently. And Gandhi was referred to as Gandhi Maharaj. But the overall picture is that of a god in human form, savior of humanity.
There are families in Assam who have given away all their possessions for the cause of Gandhiji. One such is the family of Dr. Hari Krishna Das, a civil surgeon under the British government, who resigned to become full-time Gandhian along with his family.
His daughter Amal Prabha Das was a brilliant student of science. She had done her MSc in chemistry from Calcutta University. She had dedicated herself to the Gandhian cause. And it was Hari Krishna Das who had built for Gandhi a cottage in 1946. Gandhi stayed here in the Saranya Ashram for 3 days, and it was Dr. Hari Krishna Das's house. And Amal Prabha Das was appointed almost officer in charge of the Kasturba Trust. She was handpicked by Mahatma Gandhi, and it is in the complete works of Gandhi there are references to Amal Prabha Das.
Though Gandhiji made 4 visits to Assam and touched several districts, it was only once, in 1921, that he could make it to the Barak Valley in southern Assam. Professor Amalendu Bhattacharya of Silchar takes us back.
He started his journey from Tinsukia by railway train. He travelled in an ordinary compartment with wooden benches. When he reached Lamding, the Lamding-Badorpur passenger train had left the station. In such a situation, the railway authority had attached his compartment with a goods train. In all the stations, huge number of people gathered and paid their respect, shouting nationalistic slogans. The train reached Badorpur in the evening of 27th August. A public meeting was organized near the railway station at Badorpur. The many among the crowd present in the meeting sang in chorus patriotic songs. Gandhiji reached Silchar at around 10 p.m. Here too, people had turned up in large number to welcome him. He stayed in the house of prominent leader Kamini Kumar Chanda. Despite all the exertion, Gandhiji was seen enjoying with children, perhaps to get relief from the stress and strain of tedious journey.
Gandhiji had also inspired poets and lyricists in Assam's Bengali-speaking Barak Valley to compose songs which described the mood of the people. While the little thatch and bamboo cottage called Gandhikar stands strong even today in the Kasturba Ashram in the heart of Guwahati, the Assam capital also has one of the rarest Gandhi statues in the entire world. Standing outside the Gandhi Mandap, atop the Saranya hill, it is a statue worth seeing, a masterpiece by the legendary Ramkinkar Bej. The Mahatma in this sculpture is in a pensive mood and is walking over a heap of human skeletons.
Proti Joy Mahatma Gandhi Dolita Bharatar Ahar Proti Joy Mahatma Gandhi.
Gandhiji's memory has been kept alive in Assam by none other than Bhupen Hazarika, who has written, composed and sung at least 4 songs about him. While he wrote the first song, Dalit Bharatar Ashar Pratik, Jai Mahatma Gandhi, in 1947, as India attained independence, he wrote the second song a few hours after Gandhiji was assassinated in 1948. Bhupen Hazarika, in fact, was in Kolkata, along with his sister Sudakshina, to record a few songs for All India Radio's 30-minute daily Assamese program, then aired from Kolkata, when Gandhiji was assassinated. His 86-year-old sister, Sudakshina Sharma, pours out her heart describing that day.
Bhupenda and I were in a Kolkata hotel then. Suddenly, the lights went off everywhere. All of Kolkata was plunged into darkness. They said, Mahatma Gandhi has been shot. We were feeling so low. We didn't ask for any food or anything. Kamal Narayan Chaudhary and Purushottam Das were then producers of Assamese programs based in Kolkata. They asked Bhupenda to write a song the very same evening. They would record it. The song was written. It went like this.
It has been more than 7 decades that Gandhiji walked this world. Almost 75 years since his footsteps last echoed in the hills and valleys of Assam. Yet, they've left a lasting imprint in the hearts of the people there. And that song resonates in their hearts too, the one in which Bhupen Hazarika's deep baritone was choked with tears while radiating from All India Radio Calcutta one day after Gandhiji's assassination, and sung again by his sister Sudakshina Sharma on the 12th of February 1948, as Gandhiji's ashes were immersed in the mighty Brahmaputra by then Assam Chief Minister Lokopriyo Gopinath Bordoloi, in the presence of several thousand mourners, all sobbing along with the wind that embraced and scattered the ashes. The bereft wind that asked forlornly, Bapuji, where have you gone?
Bapuji, Koloino Gola.